And excuse me. Hi book lovers, this is Storm Reviews. If you're a regular viewer, thank you for coming back and watching more of my videos. If you're a new viewer, welcome here, it's lovely to have you. My name is Storm and I review books with a brutal honesty. This week I'm going to be doing a re-review of the Priory of the Orange Tree, which is, as you can see, fucking huge. Usually I try and avoid spoilers, but I have a lot I want to say about this book, and it's, as you can see, really big, so there is actually a lot to talk about as well. So I've done a spoiler-free review, which you can see on my channel, and this will be the spoiler-free review. My spoiler-free review is actually one of the first videos I did as well, so it's quite shit editing-wise, but the content is good, so give it a watch. I also want to apologise if the audio is absolute balls right now. There is a huge storm going on outside, so I think my microphone might pick up a little bit of that, so apologies. The Priory of the Orange Tree is a high fantasy novel. Honestly, it's hard to briefly go over the plot because there's so many moving parts, but the gist of it is that 1,000 years ago, an evil ancient dragon called the Nameless One was injured and bound in the abyss. So the book takes place 1,000 years after this, and the Nameless One's evil dragon friends have started waking up, so everyone's kind of wondering if the ancient evil is going to come back and finish the rest of the world the way it was going to do the first time. This, of course, is a massive oversimplification of an incredibly complicated plot with a lot of politics and religion and world building, so I'm just gonna leave it there because there's no way I can briefly go over the plot and do justice to the nuance of the story. So that's the kind of brief, spoiler-free overview of the story. If you haven't read it, I'm gonna tell you again, please go read it and then come back, but you've been warned, I can't stop you. The world building was incredible. Every part of each country felt very distinct, and they each had their own climate, special foods, smells, religion, economy. Because the story takes place after 1,000 years after the original event, i.e. the slaying of the Nameless One, the history behind each of the world felt so fully fleshed out. The history also drives the motivations of all the characters because they've grown up with different ideas of what actually happened 1,000 years ago. The characters' religions and upbringing are the core foundations of their values as adults, which is just an amazing feat of writing. I also want to mention that despite the size of the book and the amount of detail in the world building, there weren't pages and pages of expositions or descriptions of the world. I do not have a high attention span, so that was really appreciated. Most of the pages are dedicated to moving the plot forward or character development. I didn't have to wade through multiple exposition dumps, and the book tells me just a name or a place and expects me to catch up. The way I phrased that sounded like an insult, but it was actually a compliment. The book does not treat me like I'm an idiot and needs to be spoon-fed loads of information all at once. It treats me like I'm a competent adult with competent reading skills, and I should be able to piece 2 and 2 together. The characters themselves were amazing. Queen Sabran comes off as a typical self-centered, self-absorbed, disconnected from reality queen, but as Eid gets to know her, the reader gets to know her as well, and you realise that she's actually got the weight of 1,000-year legacy resting on her shoulders. And she doesn't want to have kids, she doesn't want to get married, but unfortunately that's the path that she's been forced down. The book shows Queen Sabran's struggles as she realises she actually has no agency over how her life is meant to go, because if she does do what she wants to do, then the whole fucking world gets eaten by an evil dragon. I mean, we find out that that's not actually true, but that's what she's been raised to believe, and that's what she thoroughly believes. Sabran also doesn't know who's nice to her because they have to be, or who's nice to her because they actually like her. And that's one of the reasons that she falls in love with Eid, because Eid is always honest with her, mostly because she doesn't give a fuck what Sabran thinks, because Sabran's not actually her queen. Speaking of the relationship between Sabran and Eid, it is an honest to God, slow burn romance. I've talked before in some other videos about how I'm not a huge fan of romance plotlines, and most of the time I just find them unnecessary, annoying, and very unhealthy. This is definitely not the case here. The romance is built on a foundation of mutual trust and respect. Sabran loves Eid because of her honesty, because she's grown up with so many dishonest people around her who will say whatever they need to say just to stay in the Queen's good graces. Eid loves Sabran because she's always trying to do the right thing, and even in the face of numerous tragedies, Sabran always tries to stay compassionate and kind. The way their romance is written, it both is and isn't a part of the story. It does play a huge factor in both of the characters' changing motivations, but it isn't ever the sole focus. That means that the romance doesn't overtake the overarching fantasy plot, but it doesn't undermine its importance either. There are also no stupid, fucking annoying love triangles. I hate love triangles, and I am so happy the Priory didn't stoop so low, even though it did have the chance. Because Sabran has to marry someone of equal standing to bear a child, and it's made clear that when she does this, it's purely out of strategic motivation and because she thinks the world will literally end if she doesn't. She's been putting it off her whole life because she's just not interested. It also happens when Eid and Sabran aren't even sure of their own feelings for each other yet because it's so new, and I think neither of them have ever had feelings like it before. Sabran just because she wants to be a single Pringle, and Eid because she's basically an international spy. I don't think either of them were on their way to love. So all that to sum up a rather long point that the Priory doesn't do love triangles, I am grateful. As a sort of side point, one of the main reasons I'm not a fan of romance is because I think too many books use a romance plotline in place of any kind of platonic relationship. Particularly between men and women, which in my opinion happens because there's somehow a lesser value in platonic relationships, which is bullshit. The Priory shows the friendship between Sabran and Loth and Eid and Loth, and explicitly says more than once that these are purely platonic relationships, and all the parties involved don't see each other that way. But their friendships aren't treated as anything less than, and I think that's a huge part in why the romance works so well. Which is a great segue into Lord Arlatoth Beck. I thought Loth was such a lovely character. He just goes through so much awful hardship and he's constantly getting thrown into situations that are way above his pay grade, but he just grits his teeth and does his best anyway. He just lurches from near-death experience to near-death experience, and he always gets his ass rescued by someone much more fucking competent than him, and I just love him. He's a human Labrador and he just wants to help. Nicholas was an excellent anti-hero. He definitely wasn't a protagonist, but I wouldn't go so far as to say he was an antagonist either. He definitely did some morally fucked up stuff, but the book does a great job at building motivations, like clear motivations for everything that he does, so they're not excusable, but maybe understandable. Mutilating a dragon is obviously not cool, and I did want to twat him around the face when that happened. But he grew up in a country where dragons are seen as personified evil, and he is, at that point in the book, a very old man, so I can imagine the idea is really hard to shake. He does do the right thing in the end, and I'm glad he got some closure. It would also be terrible of me if I didn't mention the outstanding representation in this book. LGBT people, people of colour, people with mental health issues, they all have a solid representation in the Priory. As a woman of colour and as a part of the LGBT community, I can't tell you how nice it was to read a high fantasy story with characters like me, particularly in high fantasy, which has traditionally not been represented well. There really isn't very much I didn't like about this book. It did take me a while to start to wrap my head around things at the start, but that's not really the book's fault. I did actually, as I mentioned, appreciate it not treating me like I was an idiot, and I also did realise quite near the end that there was a fucking glossary at the end of the book which would have solved many of my problems. The mutilated dragon getting a prosthetic scale was super badass. Every time I pictured the red damsels, I thought of the character from Journey in their big cloak running around the sand. I would not be mad if Samantha Shannon decided to write a prequel that was placed 1,000 years ago when they did a battle with a nameless one. I didn't know I needed a high fantasy story with pirates in it until now. I really want a dragon best friend the way that Tane has a dragon best friend. I also want an ancient magical wolf beast friend the way that Eid has a magical ancient wolf beast friend. In conclusion, 10 out of 10 storms. My rating has still stayed the same. If you haven't done so already, just please fucking read this book. It's so good. So that's my review of the Priory of the Orange Tree, but the most magical thing that you can do is click subscribe. Thank you for watching. I've got my subscribe orb shown on the screen probably sometime around now. And there's another video of mine as well which will also show up on the screen. So if you're interested in watching any more of my videos, then feel free to click through. Next week I'll be reviewing A Curse So Dark and Lonely, which I'm not gonna lie to you, I fucking hated this book, so you can get ready to tune in next week if you want to see me rant and rave and swear to fuck. But have a lovely week and I'll see you next time.